Welcome to your storytelling. Enjoy the stories, and don't forget to subscribe. You know how some people just rub you the wrong way for no clear reason? That was her, Natalie, our neighbor. She lived in the house directly next to ours with her tiny white dog, her fake blonde hair, and her yoga pants that seemed permanently glued to her. My husband, Jake, used to grumble every time she walked by. "Ugh, she's so annoying," he'd mutter. He'd roll his eyes dramatically if she waved at him. I thought it was a harmless dislike. I had no idea that annoying Natalie would be the woman who tore my marriage apart. It started to bother me, honestly. Jake's hatred for Natalie was weirdly intense. He would get angry if she parked slightly over the line, furious if her dog barked, and once he even fake coughed "slut" under his breath when she jogged by. I remember laughing and telling him he was being dramatic. He said, "I just don't like fake people." I should have known. I should have seen it then. That kind of hatred wasn't real. It was performance. He was hiding something. And oh, what a performance it was. One day, I came home early from work and Jake wasn't there. His car was gone, and I didn't think much of it until I noticed something strange. Natalie's curtains moved. I could have sworn I saw a shadow. No, too. I stood there frozen, staring at her window like it might confess something. A few minutes later, Jake texted, "Stuck in traffic. Be home soon." Except traffic that day, there was none. I checked. I really wish I hadn't checked. That night, I mentioned Natalie offhandedly. How I thought she looked sad lately. Jake practically snarled, "That woman is trash. Probably can't keep a man." He went on a mini rant about her stupid little dog and how she always smiled, like she's better than everyone. It was excessive, and now that I look back, over the top, like he was trying to convince himself. The more he talked about her, the more I started to wonder, why was she always so friendly to me? And why did she flinch when she saw Jake? You know what finally tipped me off? Her dog. That little white fluffball hated everyone, except Jake. One day, I saw them outside. Natalie was on her porch, Jake was watering the plants, and the dog ran right to him, wagging its tail. And she smiled at him like they shared a private joke. It was quick, but I saw it. I felt it. That look between them, it wasn't new. It was old, familiar, intimate. I swear my stomach dropped. I knew something was very wrong. The next day, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. I asked Jake casually, "Did you see Natalie yesterday?" He paused. I saw his eyes flicker. "Yeah," he said quickly. "I gave her some advice on her car. She's been having issues." I didn't believe it. I knew for a fact her car had been in the shop for weeks. The tension was thick between us, like an invisible wall. I was starting to realize that the advice he gave her didn't add up. And there was more, so much more. A few days later, I ran into Natalie in the grocery store. I had no intention of speaking to her, but she made the first move. "Hey, I was wondering if you and Jake were free next weekend. We're having a small barbecue." I smiled, but my heart was pounding. "We'll see," I replied, trying to sound casual. But Natalie's eyes lingered just a little too long. It was then I realized that the familiarity between them wasn't just neighbors being friendly, it was something else. Something darker. Everything came crashing down the night I found a text on Jake's phone. I wasn't snooping, I promise. It just lit up in front of me, a message from an unsaved number. "I miss you, baby. Can't wait for tonight." My heart stopped. I read it again. And again. There was no mistaking it. It was her. I froze. I couldn't breathe. I didn't know what to do. I knew it wasn't a mistake. This was real. And Jake, my perfect, faithful husband, he was cheating on me with the one person he claimed to hate. Natalie. I couldn't keep it in any longer. I had to confront him. "Jake," I said, my voice trembling. "Who is this baby you've been texting?" He went pale. "What are you talking about?" He tried to act shocked, but I could see the panic in his eyes. "Don't lie." I snapped. "I know it's Natalie." The silence that followed was suffocating. He stammered. "It's not what you think." I cut him off. "Don't try to explain it away. I want the truth. Right now." His face twisted, and then he finally spoke, his voice low and defeated. "I've been seeing her for over 2 years." My blood went cold. 2 years? My mind was spinning. He continued. "At first, it was just a stupid thing. She was there. She made me feel something I didn't have with you anymore. I felt like the ground had been ripped from under me." "So you lied to me for years?" I demanded. He nodded. "I never meant for it to go this far. But we're in love, and I've been lying to you." That was the moment I realized everything was a lie. Every word, every touch, every "I love you" was just a mask. Jake tried to explain himself, but every word felt like a knife in my chest. It started as nothing, he said, just a flirtation. But over time, it became more. He told me about their secret dates, how they'd meet when I was away at work or when I thought he was out with friends. I sat there, numb, hearing about their stolen moments together. It was a betrayal that went so deep, I could barely breathe. He kept apologizing, but I couldn't hear it. His apologies meant nothing now. The trust was shattered beyond repair. I wanted to scream at him. I wanted to punch him, hit him with everything I had, but I couldn't. Instead, I was silent. Anger burned inside me, but I couldn't let it out. Not yet. I stood up slowly, the weight of his betrayal crushing me, and walked out of the room. I needed space. I needed air. How could the man I loved, the man I married, betray me like this? And with her, the one person I thought I could trust? I felt like I didn't even know him anymore. A few days passed. Jake begged me to forgive him, but the words never felt real. He was still lying. He was still trying to control the narrative. That's when I decided to go see Natalie. I don't know why I did it. Maybe I needed to confront the woman who had stolen my husband. Or maybe I was hoping to see something that would explain all this madness. I knocked on her door, and when she opened it, I saw her face fall. "Oh, it's you," she said, and I could hear the nervousness in her voice. It was then that I knew. She wasn't just a woman he cheated with. She was in love with him too, and I was nothing but a pawn in their twisted game. I demanded answers. "How long have you and Jake been seeing each other?" She hesitated, then finally admitted, 2 years. 2 years. Just like Jake had said. But it wasn't just an affair, it was her obsession. She told me how she and Jake had plans. They talked about a future together, about escaping the life they were pretending to live. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. This wasn't just a fling. This was a deep connection that had been brewing for far too long. And now I was left to pick up the pieces of a life that was nothing like what I thought it was. I stood there, my heart breaking into 1,000 pieces. "Did you ever think about me?" I asked her, my voice shaking with emotion. Natalie didn't answer right away. She just stared at me, her eyes cold. Finally, she spoke. "I didn't want to hurt you. But Jake was always going to choose me. He always did. That was it, the final betrayal. The truth was that I had been the fool all along. They had been lying, manipulating, and plotting behind my back. I was the last to know, and now I had to figure out what to do next. I went home after my conversation with Natalie, feeling more lost than I'd ever felt in my life. Jake was still at the house, waiting for me. When I walked in, he stood up and tried to touch me, but I pulled away. "I know everything," I said, my voice barely a whisper. The shock on his face was the only thing that made me feel anything. He opened his mouth to say something, but I cut him off. "Don't say anything. I've heard enough lies." That was when I realized there was nothing left to save. He had already chosen her, and I wasn't the one he wanted anymore. The days that followed were a blur. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't eat. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw their faces together. Jake, the man I loved, and Natalie, the woman who had destroyed everything. I tried to reach out to friends, but I didn't want to hear their sympathy. I didn't want advice. I just wanted the pain to stop. I spent most of my time in our house, staring at the walls, wondering how I hadn't seen it all before. The lies were so carefully constructed, the betrayals so hidden. And I had believed it all. I had been living in a fantasy. Jake wouldn't let me go that easily. He begged me to forgive him. He cried, promised he would change, that he never meant for any of it to happen. But nothing he said could undo what he had done. I was angry, heartbroken, and confused. The man I had trusted, the man I had built a life with, had betrayed me in the worst possible way. I wanted to hate him, but it was hard. We had history, memories. But those were just ghosts now, symbols of a love that had never been real. I couldn't forgive him. Not yet. Not ever. One morning, I woke up with a sense of clarity I hadn't felt before. I couldn't stay in this house, surrounded by reminders of the lies, the deceit, the betrayal. Jake kept asking me if we could work it out, but I realized that working it out would mean continuing to live in the shadow of his lies. And I was done living in the shadows. I packed my things slowly, methodically, knowing I was making the hardest decision of my life. I would leave. I would finally take control of my life, even if it meant walking away from everything I thought I knew. The moment I walked out the door, I felt like a weight had been lifted from my shoulders. It was terrifying, yes, but it also felt freeing. I could feel Jake's eyes on me, full of regret, full of desperate hope. He begged me not to leave, but the more he pleaded, the stronger my resolve became. I couldn't be with a man who had treated me like I didn't matter. I couldn't stay with someone who had been lying to me for years. I shut the door behind me, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I didn't look back. Leaving Jake wasn't easy, but it was necessary. The first few weeks were the hardest, but I slowly began to find myself again. I stayed with a friend, and every day I felt a little more like myself. The pain of betrayal didn't go away overnight, but it started to dull. I began to realize that I was stronger than I had ever given myself credit for. I didn't need Jake. I didn't need the life we had built together. I needed to heal, to grow, to reclaim my happiness, and I was ready to do it, no matter how long it took. As the days passed, I started to reconnect with the things I loved. I hadn't painted in years, but now I found myself picking up my brushes again. I had always loved painting, had always used it as an escape. It was like my mind finally had space to breathe, to process everything that had happened. Slowly, I started to create again, letting my emotions spill onto the canvas. Every stroke of paint was a step forward, a step away from the life I had left behind. One day, while I was out running errands, I ran into Natalie at a local cafe. I wasn't expecting to see her, and seeing her brought back all the old anger and pain. She looked just like she always did, calm, collected, and unaffected. "Oh, it's you," she said, as if she hadn't destroyed my life. I felt a wave of rage wash over me, but I kept it inside. I had no desire to argue with her. Instead, I just smiled coldly. "I'm glad you're happy," I said, my voice dripping with sarcasm. Her expression faltered for just a moment before she quickly composed herself. I walked away, feeling a strange sense of satisfaction. I wasn't going to let her affect me anymore. Months passed, and life began to feel like it was getting back on track. I found a new apartment, one I could call my own. It wasn't much, but it was mine, and that meant everything. I was slowly rebuilding my life, brick by brick. I met new people, started new friendships, and even considered dating again. It wasn't easy, and I wasn't ready to rush into anything, but I felt a flicker of hope. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was in control of my own story. I had left the past behind, and I was looking forward to the future. Jake tried to reach out a few times, but I ignored his calls and messages. I couldn't go back. I had finally realized that my happiness wasn't tied to him, or to the life we had. I was enough on my own. And as I started to build a new future, I knew that I deserved more than the lies and betrayals of my past. I was stronger, wiser, and ready for whatever came next. The end of one chapter was just the beginning of another, and this time, I would be the one writing it. It had been nearly 6 months since I left Jake. Life had been moving forward, and I had been feeling more at peace with myself. But then one evening, my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. Hesitantly, I opened it. It was from Jake. "I've been thinking about you a lot lately," it said. "I miss you. Can we talk?" A wave of anger surged through me, but at the same time, I felt an unsettling pang of sadness. I deleted the message without responding. I knew what he wanted. He was trying to re-enter my life. But I was no longer the woman who would fall for his lies again. I had moved on. One evening, I was sitting at a coffee shop, going through some old photos on my phone, when I stumbled across one from our wedding day. I smiled bitterly at the image of Jake and me, full of hope and love, unaware of the lies that would follow. For a moment, I let myself remember the good times, the laughter, the intimacy. But that memory didn't hurt as much anymore. I realized that I was no longer the person who depended on that love to define my worth. I had found strength in myself. I could look back without being dragged down by the past. And for that, I was grateful. A few months passed, and life began to settle into a new routine. I woke up every day feeling a little lighter. I was getting better at being on my own. The loneliness didn't feel as overwhelming anymore. I'd made peace with the fact that I wasn't going to have the perfect love story, but I was learning to love myself in ways I hadn't before. I took up new hobbies, traveled to places I'd always wanted to visit, and surrounded myself with people who genuinely cared about me. Slowly, I began to realize that my happiness wasn't dependent on anyone else. It had always been within me. One day, I found myself standing in front of Jake's house. I hadn't been here in months, but I had something I needed to do. I knocked on the door, and when he answered, his face fell. He was clearly surprised to see me. "What are you doing here?" he asked, his voice tight with uncertainty. I took a deep breath. "I'm not here to argue," I said. "I just need you to know that I've forgiven you. But I can't forget. I've moved on, and I'm finally at peace. I'm no longer angry. I just needed to say goodbye, for good." He stared at me for a long moment, and then nodded. It was as if the weight had been lifted from both of us. There was nothing left to say. As I walked away from Jake's house for the last time, I felt lighter than I had in years. The anger, the betrayal, the heartache, all of it had melted away. I didn't need closure from him anymore. I had found it within myself. I was free. I realized that the life I thought I wanted wasn't the one I needed. The one I needed was one where I could stand on my own, free from the shadows of the past. And that was exactly what I was doing. I was no longer bound by the man who had tried to tear me down. I was in control of my future, and I was ready for whatever came next. I was stronger than I had ever been. And for the first time in a long time, I was finally at peace. Thank you for listening to my story until now. If you like the video, please support it by subscribing and liking.